Hello, little friends. Are you ready to hear a delightful story about a busy little mouse? Today, we're going to explore the tale of Mrs. Tittlemouse. Once upon a time, in a cozy little house under the roots of a big tree, lived a tidy mouse named Mrs. Tittlemouse. She was very proud of her clean and neat home. Mrs. Tittlemouse loved to keep everything in order. She would sweep her floors, wash her dishes, and tidy her little furniture every single day. One sunny morning, Mrs. Tittlemouse was busy dusting her shelves when she heard a strange noise. What could that be, she wondered, her little ears perked up in curiosity. Suddenly, there was a loud thump. Mrs. Tittlemouse peeked out of her door and saw a big, furry creature. It was a badger named Mr. Todd. Mr. Todd was not very tidy at all. He had dirt on his paws and leaves in his fur. "Hello there, Mrs. Tittlemouse," he said with a grin. "I've come to visit." Mrs. Tittlemouse felt a little nervous. She liked her home to be neat and clean, and she wasn't sure what to do with a visitor like Mr. Todd. But being a kind little mouse, she invited him inside. "Would you like some tea, Mr. Todd?" she asked politely, trying to hide her worries. Mr. Todd plopped down on her tiny chair, and it creaked under his weight. "Tea sounds lovely," he said, and Mrs. Tittlemouse hurried to prepare it. As she was making tea, Mrs. Tittlemouse heard more noises. This time, it was a family of little rabbits hopping by. They peeked in and said, "Can we come in too?" Oh dear, Mrs. Tittlemouse's home was getting quite crowded. She smiled and said, "Of course, come in, but please be careful." Soon, her cozy little home was filled with chatter and laughter. Mr. Todd was telling funny stories, and the little rabbits were giggling away. But then, something unexpected happened. Mr. Todd started to eat all of Mrs. Tittlemouse's delicious treats. "Oh no," she thought, "this is not tidy at all." Just then, one of the little rabbits accidentally knocked over a cup, and it went rolling across the floor. "Oh dear," cried Mrs. Tittlemouse. She quickly rushed to pick it up, but as she did, she realized that maybe having friends over wasn't so bad after all. They were having fun together. After all the excitement, Mrs. Tittlemouse decided to join in the fun. "Let's play a game," she exclaimed, and everyone cheered. They played hide and seek, and Mrs. Tittlemouse felt so happy. Her home might not be as tidy as it used to be, but it was filled with laughter and joy. As the sun began to set, Mr. Todd and the little rabbits said goodbye. "Thank you for a lovely day, Mrs. Tittlemouse," they called out as they left. Mrs. Tittlemouse smiled and waved. Her heart was full, and she realized that sometimes a little mess is worth the happiness of having friends. And from that day on, Mrs. Tittlemouse welcomed all her friends into her home, knowing that laughter and love were the best things of all. So remember, little ones, it's great to be tidy, but it's even better to share good times with friends. The end.